So hello, everyone. Apparently, our streaming is now up and running. Welcome to this panel called Transnational Collaboration in Investigative Journalism. This is organized by the Center for the Study of Global Media and Democracy at Goldsmiths. And my name is Irving Huerta. I am a journalist myself. I am also an academic and a PhD student at Goldsmiths. And I am chairing this panel, and I'm really enthusiastic and really happy to be here with you and to also share this panel with three very interesting academics and at least one of the journalists. So very welcome. And this panel has the aim of exploring the intricacies of journalism and of transnational collaborations in investigative journalism. And I want to just briefly say that we have with us people like Gabriela Manuli from the Global Investigative Journalism Network. We have also Vanessa de Macedo Higgins-Joyce from the university, Texas State University. And also Rodrigo Arteaga, who is a PhD candidate in the Sociology Department at Cambridge. I am going to give more specific biographies later on. But just kind of as a brief introduction, I want to say what this panel is going to be about. And I want to read to you what this panel will be about. And what we put together for you to enjoy and also discuss, I hope. So, facilitated by new technology, collaborations is celebrated by investigative journalists. For instance, we have the Panama Papers, Paradise Papers, Swiss Leaks, and most recently, FinCen, all these examples with a lot of traction and a lot of popularity with high-profile examples. And most of them have been coordinated by entities like the International Consortium of Investigative Journalism. We have also regional examples of these collaborations. For instance, we have Project Daphne, investigating the death of Maltese journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia and the stories that she left unfinished. We have other examples, for instance, from Latin America with the Red Latinoamericana de Periodismo de Investigación, Estructurado, which was a group of investigative teams from Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Peru about the scandal of Odebrecht. And behind all these high-profile examples or stories of transnational collaboration, there are also hidden issues, crucially, questions of what journalism is, how it can be sustained and brought into sharp relief. The ideal of collaboration challenges previously given assumptions about the competitiveness of media companies. This is one aspect that we would like to touch upon, while at the same time, the shift away from previously sacred practices in journalist cultures. We can be talking about exclusive scoops, fast production of news products, the praise of heroic individuals risking their own lives to inform the public and so on. And all this is happening alongside the increasing concentration of media power and the hegemony of centers of knowledge that push back against the search of more local and community-based reporting. So the aim of this panel is discussing the shifts in the practice of investigative journalism and its implications for democracies around the world, for media organizations, but also for practitioners, journalists, and all those who do journalistic work, and the public. So some of the questions that we want to start with, driving this panel is, what is at stake when investigative journalists embark on transnational collaborations? What and who are driving collaborations? What and who are driving collaborations? What stories are subjected to collaboration? And how does transnational collaboration impact on local journalism? So all these questions are driving this panel, and I'm really glad and really happy to have such a great panel with me. And after saying that, I'm going to briefly say how we're going to do this. So we're going to have three interventions, first from Gabi Manuli, then from Vanessa Higgins, then from Rodrigo Arteaga. Each one of them will have 15 minutes to talk about the work that they've been doing, for instance, at the Global International Journalism Network, or the incipient research that I've been doing as well in the academia, each of them with 15 minutes. And after that, I'm going to try to wrap up, and we're going to have, after that, time for Q&A, okay, from you. So if you have any questions, if you have anything to say or to contribute to this discussion, please do on the YouTube channel. Just below the video, there is the option of asking some of these questions or making any comments. So yeah, please, we're going to be really glad to discuss and have your ideas and your input. So please feel free to do it. So I am going to start by handing this over to Gabriela Manuli, and I am going to tell you who she is. She's the Deputy Director of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, an association of more than 200 non-profit organizations in 80 countries. A native of Argentina, she has been a journalist for more than 15 years and has extensive international experience in Latin America, Europe, and the United States. She currently lives in Budapest, Hungary. She coordinates the GIJN Women Group and sits on the board of directors of Chicas Poderosas. Manuli was a speaker at several international journalism conferences, including IRE, the Peru Journalism Festival, the African Investigative Journalism Conference, the UNESCO International Conference on Safety of Media Professionals, and Google News Impact Summit, among others. She has an MA in Public Policy, Media Stream, with distinctions at the Central European University in Budapest, and graduated with first-class honors in social communication science at the University of Buenos Aires. So, Gabi, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation, and sorry for the long bio. I will cut it next time. So it's a pleasure to be here, and thanks for everybody that is joining on YouTube or will watch it later. It's very appreciated, especially in this time of Zoom fatigue. So I prepare a brief presentation, and I'm going to ask Irving to tell me if I'm going too long. So, but I think we will be okay. So let me share my screen. Sorry. Okay. Okay. So as they said, I'm the Deputy Director of the Global Investigative Journalism Network, GIJN. I would like to start the presentation briefly telling what GIJN is and what we do and which kind of resources we have, because I'm sure there are a lot of researcher, academics, or journalists watching this stream that might be interested in learning how they can interact with us and how we can help them. So as they say, we are a member organization, but we also, so we are there for everybody. We train reporters, we do big global investigative journalism conferences that are open for everybody. We have our social media stream, we have webinars, everything out there. So you can see a little bit there what we do. And in fact, with the pandemic, we shifted a lot of the programming online. So you can see. So we have members all over the world, and we keep growing. As I said, our members are organizations and not individuals. So are organizations that work and promote and whose main mission is investigative reporting. For example, ICIJ is a member, OCCRP is a member, or smaller groups in different countries. So we work a lot connecting each other and trying to help. As I say, we have all these streams in different languages, and we keep growing, and we try to fill the gap, because of course there are a lot of resources about investigative journalism, data journalism, collaboration in English, but maybe not that much in other languages. So we are working on translating, on creating original resources in different languages. We have a few groups which are great for networking. As I say, my little passion project is GIJN Women, is to discuss issues in women in investigative journalism, and we have a lot of different channels. We have a listserv where we have journalists, investigative journalists from all over the world. And we have the help desk where people can come and can ask their questions and we can connect. And a lot of what we do at the help desk is empowering collaborations. We get daily or weekly questions like, I would like a reporter here, a reporter there, I want to do a collaboration, who you can connect me with? Nowadays, we are investigative journalism, we are facing a lot of challenges. You can see they are in the slide a little bit. And I would say that since the pandemic, this is even worse. There are a lot of attacks using the pandemic against free press, using the pandemic as an excuse. So we are quite concerned about what we are doing out there. But we also understand that part of the backlash against media is a reaction to our own success. Investigative journalists are getting better and getting better at using tools that before they didn't, are getting better at collaborating and doing better reporting with sophisticated tools. I would say that we like to say that the conferences is where the magic happens. So we've been doing, this is since we established the GIJN Secretariat and we got more formalized, but there were investigative journalism conferences before the ones you see here. So in general, we do a big global conference every 2 years. And in between, we started doing a regional conference in Asia. Why in Asia? Because we have a lot of like friends, organizations that they are already doing regional conferences in Africa. You have the Investigative Journalism Conference in Africa. You have Colpin in Latin America. You have ARIJ in the Middle East. There are other nodes where we currently collaborate, but in Asia, there was nothing like this. So that's when we started the Asia conference. Unfortunately, last year we had to cancel the Asia conference, and this year by November we are supposed to do the in-person conference in Sydney, but obviously because of the pandemic, we don't know what's going to happen. But why I say where the magic happens, if you come to one of these conferences, you can actually see how collaboration gets started. Maybe they get started sitting in a session, listening to a speaker, and an idea comes up. But most of the collaboration gets started in the hallways, in the drinking coffee or something stronger, in a party, in a networking session. So you can see there. And we make a big effort in our conferences to expand. I would say that there is like a network of usual suspects. You have investigative journalists that we meet in every conference. We know who we are, but we always try, and we have a fellowship program where we bring new people, new faces, people that probably cannot afford. So we are all the time trying to promote this, we try our best to select the fellows to cover them broadest like countries ever. Like we try to bring fellows from different countries, different regions, different cultures, different languages. So it's quite interesting to see. I wanted to dig into some examples of transnational collaborations that we know for certain that started at the conference. Of course, there are many more that we are not even aware, but there are a lot of big investigations that we know that our conference had something to do. So here are just an example so you can see which kind of topics for us are important and that probably then spark transnational collaboration. So you can see we do networking for languages. We have, of course, the main topics: organized crime and corruption, disinformation. We started women issues, exile media, environmental investigations, where it's a very fertile area for collaborations. You have regional collaborations, of course, health and medicine, and this is proving very, very important nowadays, and different. And then also we did, for the first time, we started doing a track of indigenous peoples, where we bring indigenous journalists, and for example, they are the ones you can see there at the bottom. It started at our conferences, and they did a transnational investigation tracking indigenous issues. So let me find my notes because it's so much to remember. It's a report that examines global anti-indigenous movements and hate speech in different countries, Canada, US, Australia. Then this is the one you see, Yanukovych leaks. It's an older story, and this is in fact, it's not transnational per se, but this when the Ukrainian president fled and he dumped a lot of documents in a reservoir, and a group of journalists that in fact met at the conference in Rio in 2013 quickly organized everything, and they went there and they started diving, actually finding divers to find the documents. If you see this story, it's quite impressive, the hands-on collaboration. Then of course, Panama Papers, FinCen files, like we always have a lot of people from ICIJ, and they are always doing their side meetings, and we are happy to help with any resource we have. Then this pangolin trafficking collaboration also started at our Asia conference. And sometimes you don't forget that, for example, when you have a big global collaboration such as Panama Papers or the FinCen files or something like that, then you also have inside this global collaboration, you have regional nodes like in Africa or this and that, and these are also people that we have been training and are our members. So let me see the timing. I think we are still okay. So basically, these are just a few examples that we handpick, but it also makes me worry a little bit about what's coming next, because I'm a firm believer of face-to-face interaction, and I've been organizing, of course, with a team, but I've been working a lot in the global conference since 2013. So I have attended most of them. Some of them I was on maternity leave, but anyhow, I work on the logistics. So I was involved in all these conferences, and I can see that nothing replaces meeting in person. Of course, then you can continue your collaboration for a year. Everybody goes to their home countries and you keep on Zoom, etc. But the meeting, the actual building trust in person, the socializing together. So in fact, we did a session last week or the week before, thinking like what's going to happen with these events, not just ours, in general, and how this will affect. So I think this will be a really interesting issue for academia in the upcoming years, how probably this pandemic affected, and also because we still don't know when it's going to change. And even if we can start, some of us being vaccinated and traveling, but then there are other countries where vaccines are not available. So I'm afraid maybe at some point it will be a little like elitist, who can travel, who cannot. So let's see. I don't want to be pessimist, and I'm a firm believer in the power of technologies. I've been working remotely for more than 10 years, but still I'm a little bit skeptical. So let me dive a little bit on what works and what does not work in collaborations. There is a lot in our website written about this. I try to make my own summary, but this is not exhaustive. Don't take this as the final list. These are a few of the pointers I want to make in my experience, mixing my experience as a journalist myself, an investigative reporter, which I was a member of the investigative reporting team in Argentina. Then I was a freelancer writing stories in different parts of the world. And now I'm not actually doing reporting. I'm more on the nonprofit and facilitating everything, but I'm constantly interacting with reporting, and I will always be a reporter, so by heart. So, but for me, it's really interesting to talk about collaboration, because in fact, when I work in newsrooms, it was before, at least in Latin America, when I was in Argentina, there was not such a thing of, we didn't get involved in this big collaboration, and especially our editors were quite old school. So I know they might be, a lot of them might be having a really hard time trying to adapt to this issue. radical collaboration in a way that I won't publish the scoop, I will share everything, and then we will publish together. Everybody will do their own story, but any finding we will share. I know that a lot of the old school journalists might have a lot of issues with this, and also I know sometimes they will say, yeah, we will share everything, and that's not the case. So again, so as I say, trust, it's super important, trusting who you are collaborating with and knowing each person. I think you need to be passionate because, of course, embarking in a transnational collaboration, it's a big project and you really need to love it. You will work in different time zones, you will work in the weekends, you will probably a lot of this do it on your extra time while you are doing your day-to-day things or your reporting. So the communication is key, how you use the channels, and not just how you use secure channels, but also how you have a consistent way of communication. Of course, there is the issue of like a global, a bigger reach. And one of the main issues that I think you need to take into account is respect, and in the way of this not parachuting, like sometimes you are doing a collaboration different countries and you might even go to that country, but you really need to be aware of the differences. You really need to trust the local reporter and not just using local reporters as fixers, but really be respectful of the different cultures. And you need a lot of diverse skills because you will be collaborating with developers, with this and this, so you need to learn the language, and you need a lot of yoga, as I would say, or a lot of patience, because it's if you are working across cultures, it's never easy. You need to be patient. You need to know and to try to understand. And the negative, it's in a way it's connected. Let me show for my other slide that I think it's important. I think it's important that we don't romanticize collaborations per se. Like I can see sometimes, oh, the big trend, we all collaborate, collaboration is great. Yeah, it's amazing, but also not all collaborations are great. Not everything it's okay or it's done for a collaboration. So I think we should also be critical of this romantic idea of collaboration. And I know some of Rodrigo will dig more into this, but I can give a few examples why I say, I don't want to be hypercritical, but why I say, let's not romanticize. I can see examples of people reaching for a collaboration partner the day before a deadline of a grant. I need a journalist here because I want to apply for a grant. So I think that's an issue when you are like just trying to collaborate because there is a grant and you want to get this grant, and no matter what. It's also, as I said, sometimes difficult to shift to this new paradigm, the editors or some of the reporters. And if you don't really embrace this radical collaboration, it won't work. You cannot really play pretend in this. You cannot really say, I'm going to share everything, but I will keep this for myself. I can also see as a negative sometimes that people really dig into collaborations and they want to do these big projects, but then maybe sometimes the local audience in the country, they are not really into this. I wouldn't say that you shouldn't do it, but sometimes it's difficult because local audience probably care about the issue, not always care about the global picture, or they want to just read the story that concerns what they care about. Egos, as you know,
Gabi,
journalists.
Can you try to wrap up, please?
Yes, so I think probably this is the end. And as I said, sometimes there is not a clear agreement. And the last sentence, like you can see it later, I can share the slides, but one of my favorite sentences here, that the media war isn't Disneyland. So if the differences are too big, accept it and don't collaborate. So probably, let me see. I wanted to do a little bit announcement that we will have a webinar working on how, and this is a big issue of collaborations, how sometimes there is, based on forbidden stories examples, how journalists can get together to try to keep the stories that someone couldn't, like Daphne Caruana or the names you mentioned. And here is are my contact, and I'm happy to answer any questions at the end. So, and we are happy to help with anything you all need at GIJN. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gabby. I think that was very insightful and really insightful, as GIJN is one of the most important organizations really at the forefront of transnational collaborations around the world. You know? So you have contacts, as you said, with people doing investigative journalism in the global north, but also in Latin America and Africa, and more recently in Asia, with all the problems that it entails. So thank you, Gabby. And now I would like to introduce Vanessa de Macedo Higgins Joyce. She's our next speaker. She's an associate professor in the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at Texas State University, and a research fellow at the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas at the University of Texas at Austin. She was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil. She worked for digital native news startups and for 2 major public opinion research companies in that city. Her research lies in the intersection of transnational media, Latin America digital journalism, and consensus building. She received her PhD in journalism from the University of Texas at Austin, with a dissertation of focusing on consensus building, function of agenda setting, and analyzing the role of transnational news media in Europe. Her research has been recently published in top journals in her area, for instance, Journalism Practice, International Communication Gazette, Journalism Studies, and the Latin American journals Cuadernos.info, Palabras Clave, Brazilian Journalism Review, and others. So it's with great pleasure that I welcome Vanessa Higgins for the panel.
Thank you so much, Irving. I really appreciate the invitation to be part of this conversation and to talk today a little bit more about a project a research project that I've been conducting with the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas. So I wanted to share also a presentation here. Just 1 second. Here we go. I think this is correct. Okay, here we go. So thank you so much, and thank you for the Center for the Study of Global Media and Democracy for hosting this really relevant and timely topic here today. It is really a great pleasure to be here. As I mentioned, this is part of a larger project from the Knight Center for Journalism in the Americas. And we've been interested in understanding a little bit more this growing phenomenon in Latin American journalism. While collaboration, transnational collaboration exists globally, we were interested in the changes that this is bringing to journalism regionally in Latin America. So we know that since the 2000s, we've had a growth in regional collaboration and brought by the digital affordances. So the technology that has allowed for communication, data mining, and even file sharings, and a whole system that really enabled these collaborations to exist. The work of organizations such as the one that Gabby just mentioned, the GIJN, and also EPs and ICIJ and Connectas that Irvin also represents here. So these organizations have really been instrumental in the growth of regional collaboration. So it also stems from the impact and recognition that previous collaborations have gained, such as the Panama Papers, that really brought awareness regionally of the impact that such collaborations can have. So while collaborations existed before, what we're seeing now is a shift to a more systematic effort with constructive aims. So a more organized, a deliberate attempt, while the organic exists, as Gabby was mentioned, when some documents show up. So the organic exists, but we're also seeing a shift to a more systematic effort with constructive aims here. So the information I'm presenting today comes from this set of focus groups that we conducted last year with 26 journalists from 11 Latin American countries, all of them engaged in collaborations that tell stories from this regional perspective, from immigration, drug trade, pandemic, environment, corruption, and many other topics that I'll talk a little bit more now. And we're interested in seeing some of the advantages and disadvantages of these collaborations and how they're really requiring a change of norms or adaptation to the journalistic norms regionally. So one of the bigger findings that we saw is this change from the individual to the collective. So this is a really seismic change from the point of view of the organization, but also from the point of view of the journalist. So what we see is that these collaborations allow for a complement of expertise and resources that is really valuable currently. So if I am a journalist who's really good at reporting and a journalist in a different country or a different organization may be really an expert in data mining or have access to a software or access to some resources that I don't have, these collective expertise is really valuable here. So the collective also allows to tackle greater causes, more complex issues that might not be covered otherwise, right? And also really tackle issues that relate to really powerful institutions that one organization by itself might be too fragile to tackle. So the power of the network here. However, the sharing of the story that Gabi was just mentioning removes this value of breaking stories, right? Of one single organization breaking a story. It's all shared. And this is a shift that has implications for the business strategies of news organizations. It's a major shift into how stories are valued in many sense. So although it's doable, of course, it requires this humility that is a big change in how journalism is done. And the sharing of the decision-making process, right? So while when you're working on a story for one organization, you have a lot of independence into the steps you take and how you're going to get there. In a collective, collaborative environment, this decision-making is shared, and so that creates complications as well. So the second major point is this shift that Gabi was also talking about from a local perspective to a global outlook, right? So that requires a change into how a journalist pitches the story to the news organization, to editors, in how you can see, show the value to news organizations of that global perspective. It changes how you understand or think about an issue or a problem, right? So no longer it is an issue with the local river, but perhaps of the community, all the communities that surround it, right? From the spring to another country that is also being affected by the similar issue. And a change in the audience. So Gabi was mentioning audiences might not always be interested in this global perspective, but the flip side of that is that you may also have an audience that no longer reside in your local area, right? As many organizations are digital, access regionally, as in the case of our focus group is Latin America. Many share this similar languages, Spanish, and can understand or would be interested in these stories. So the understanding who the audience is a challenge. So our focus group participants mentioned that they don't always know who the audience would be for these stories, right? So knowing more of that is still a big challenge. So a third point that I wanted to mention that was brought up by a focus group participant was this change from immediacy to deep dive. While in investigative journalism, by nature, it takes time to discover the story, to uncover the story, and to verify and to publish. While collaborative work takes longer. All of our focus group, all the 3 sets of focus group, several journalists mentioned the issue of time. It takes patience. Gabi was mentioning a lot of yoga. It takes a lot of time. It takes patience for the collaboration to occur. Patience to have not only one editor check the story, but now maybe 10, right? To be in agreement, to wait for a partner organization to bring up the story. So all of that takes time, and it takes patience, and it only works when everybody is together. So you have more editors, more new ones, bigger issues, bigger data sets. So it takes a lot of time for that deeper dive, right? So it allows you to go farther where you're bringing one piece of the puzzle. That was a metaphor brought by one of our participants. So you're bringing one piece of that puzzle, but other organizations are bringing other parts of that puzzle. It only works when all the parts are indeed together, and that takes time. It takes a lot of coordination for the publication, and coordination of the resources, coordination of making sure that all the steps have been satisfied, and patience to publish together. So it's a major shift in how the business of journalism was done, and that requires some, it has some implications as well for the adoption of collaborative practices. Ethics, then it's also, Gabi was talking about, it takes understanding different cultures. It takes also understanding how journalism is practiced in different settings. So that sometimes has brings up some ethical issues. One example brought was, for example, in one country, it may be acceptable to pay for a very to take a source for expensive dinner to talk about your case. But for other countries, that might be unacceptable. So it takes a lot of negotiation, understanding, and respect to different cultures there. Working with different platforms is a major challenge. So sometimes you have a print organization working alongside with a television organization from another country. And that takes some negotiation and adaptation. So it may be that you can use unnamed sources in print, but perhaps not on television. So it takes a lot of negotiation here. So also, we have a lot of different types of organizations that are working alongside. So from 100-year-old legacy media to independence, that are growing phenomenon in Latin America as well. And they don't all have the same challenges in terms of tackling certain stories, right? So perhaps a 100-year-old legacy may suffer a bigger repercussion from publishing a story, or may have had a history with the sources or the target of the investigation, and that might be completely different for independence. So that is also something that takes negotiation. Something that all of our focus groups participants mentioned was the need to abide by the agreements of the partnership. That is key. If you don't abide by the specific agreements for the specific partnership, then that can't occur. The collaboration can occur. So the network creates power, but it also creates a struggle. The sum of the parts, right? The pieces of the puzzles are stronger together there as a group, as Lourdes Chacón's papers mentioned, stronger together. I think she's listening. I hope she is. So the skills and knowledge, expertise, resources that are brought together by the investigation, a transnational collaborative investigation is stronger. It's also, as a group, journalists may be safer in that as a result of that too. The impact is greater. It does go further. It is a huge support for journalism in this time of crisis. Gabi alluded to that as well, in terms of financial, in terms of trust of media. I think very interesting that our journalists from our focus group mentioned was this huge learning opportunity personally, of personal growth, how valuable that experience was as a learning opportunity to be able to learn from others with different capabilities. But it's also a struggle with the old business models, old norms, and change in how you pitch the stories, how you sell it to organizations, how you think about the audience, and in how to negotiate it. I think very important, as Gabi mentioned, not all it's not all collaborations are right at the right moment. You have to think about if you have something to add to that group, if your audience will accept it, if it's the right time, because it's a lot of time investment in it. So all of that has to be taken into consideration as well. And I wanted to end this here with something that was mentioned consistently, the importance of a leader, clarity of rules, direction, organization, and a central editor or a central leader that helps organize how the different pieces are working together for the better final goal there. So that role is really important, and that the best collaborations work when you have an excellent central editor or leader, or a group that really is able to direct and clarify the rules and make sure everything is working in tandem, because it is a group effort, right? So I end my presentation here, and I want to say thank you once again to be part of this conversation, and look forward to talking a little bit more later on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Vanessa. This is a very interesting study that was recently conducted, and I'm sure that we are going to see more results of this in the near future. So it's very exciting, and discussing all these things with the panel and with also the people who are watching is going to be very interesting. Yeah, by the way, as an announcement, yes, we have all these comments now enabled on our YouTube channel, so you can just comment on the site, please do, or do it via Twitter. You can just mention Media Comgold on Twitter, and then we can just mention your comment or your question. We're going to have time for that, but if you want to do it right now, if all of a sudden you have a question, please just mention it right now. And now I would like to introduce our third and last speaker. Is Rodrigo Arteaga. He's a PhD candidate in sociology at the University of Cambridge, researching collaboration and cooperation in contemporary journalism in Mexico. He holds a master's in political studies in Paris, France, and a BA in politics and government at El Colegio de Mexico. So his research is also ongoing research. He's been doing field work in Mexico in the last 2-3 years, or he can talk more about that. So yes, he can say a few words about that as well. So yeah, Rodrigo, your turn, please.
Thank you very much, Sheridan. Thank you for the invitation, and thank you to Goldsmiths for organizing this panel, which I feel, I don't know, Irving, we can talk about it later, but I think this is a continuation of a longer discussion that we have had, the two of us, on this topic when we started doing our PhD in researching on investigative journalism. And I'm very happy now to expand this conversation with such experienced panelists. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Gabriela, for these fascinating interventions. And I will try just to put in dialogue my comments with some of the things that you have said. But before that, let me just make a disclaimer that this is, all these comments that I'm going to share with you are preliminary work from an ongoing PhD thesis. So I just ask for you and the audience for discretion in terms of citing. And also I very much would like to treat this, opportunity as a workshop, in the sense of getting input, getting feedback to refine these ideas. And just let me start by saying that I really like the idea behind the title of this panel, Transnational Collaborations in Journalism, well, investigative journalism, and not transnational collaborative journalism. And the reason why I liked it is because treating it as another adjective of journalism, collaborative journalism, you can name it. You have data journalism, slow journalism, solution journalism. It gives them an impression that this is a very niche, very a sub-branch of the trade, and that actually it is only a very few. It's a luxury neighborhood in the world of in the city of journalism, and this discourse of the proliferation of adjectives, I think it's not that useful. I would like to see collaborations in journalism in the sense that it speaks of the situations, or all the things that Gabriela and Vanessa have already spoken about, the situational, the context, the circumstances. So my presentation is divided into two main parts. One is the discourses and the interplay. The second part is the interplay of these discourses on the collaborative aspect of journalism and the practice. So to start with the discourse, I think what we see is an enthusiasm, a lot of energy, and I would like to read a little quote from the iconic moment of the Panama Papers, where after the publication, there was a keynote speech by Marina Walker Guevara from the ICIJ. And she said something that I always find really interesting. She said, "We live in a time of opportunity to rethink the way we work, just like the Panama Paper reporters changed their lone wolf way and created a more efficient model of collaboration and trust. Instead of following instinct, tradition, and their own egos, these journalists share their scoops rather than race against one another. They help one another." End of quote. So, and a few months, I think later, the Dean of Columbia Journalism said also, like, she proclaimed the era of the lone wolf is over, right? And this is kind of the radical sharing discourse that has been very effective, but also I think sometimes, and then I will go with the kind of the sociological gaze of saying, well, you have all this enthusiasm of radical, of a new era, and also with a new era you have a new man, a new human, and in this case a new journalist, a new nature of the reporter, and also the end of the lone wolf, and some of what Vanessa said, the old school, right? And this I don't want to be hypercritical, but and I really get the need for being evangelical about it, just to try to convince and convert colleagues. But I think there is also, well, the contribution, I think, of the social sciences and the researchers that we have been studying this is just to see the limitations, also to qualify, to see also the inequalities that are there in practice. And with that, the second part of this intervention would be precisely on those practical challenges. First, I think, and going back to why I like collaborations in journalism, like situations or arrangements of collaboration, negotiations of a collaborative aspect in the practice, is that contrary to the kind of the professional culture of the neoliberal period, where we have a lot of the nature of the journalist is the long work that is very competitive. There's competition as the engine that makes the market, the commercial media function. There is evidence that journalism has always required collaboration and cooperation. So we have, since the beginning of the 20th century and a little bit in the late 19th century, we have evidence because of ethnographic studies and also archive research, that there are a lot of practices, like reporters sharing scoops, sharing privileged information, sharing angles, sharing contacts, discussing different strategies for sharing material. And in all that evidence, that there is a collaborative dimension to the practice of journalism. Never or very rarely it is a radical enterprise. It is very careful. It is done with very cautiously, with a lot of care, with a lot of in confidence, with a lot of negotiation. It's never like a radical altruism. And I think this leads me to the second point, that I think this continues to be a reasonable, sensible strategy, because I know practitioners in the field, they know their own situation better than anyone, and this continues to be so because every story and every journalist has different circumstances, and there's a different degree of risk and uncertainty in every story, but also in every part of every member of a group. And I think a very important part of what the practical challenges are about is to acknowledge and to recognize these different levels of risk and inequalities. And this leads me to another aspect of the title of this conference, which is transnational collaborations. And I totally agree that there is a new kind of phenomenological aspect to it, like this fancy word of like the phenomena of borders, of migrations, of traffics. They are more complex, and there is this transnational interplay in the stories. But there's also an aspect that I have been thinking, that is, when we say transnational, there is also the international relations of it, and the kind of, if we see the inequalities from local, global, but also between nations, between regions, you see that there are very few reflections on the sources of these imbalances. And for those who are interested, I have been working on a previous attempt to addressing these imbalances in a global scale. And I invite you to read the McBride report, which is a controversy launched by the UNESCO and promoted by at the time in the 70s, at the time the non-aligned movement and the third world, where there was like a very clear debate on how radical sharing, in the sense of sharing technologies, sharing information, has to be always conceived in a decolonial perspective. And so this is to say that we have the grants and the international aid promoting and making calls and making the effort to sponsor these collaborations. But I think all these inequalities and the differentials of risk, they all have to go into a more egalitarian political economy of the global media system. And for that, I'm just going to share with you some of the reflections of the journalists that I had the opportunity to spoke to in Mexico. For example, one journalist from Michoacán, the state of Michoacán in Mexico, which is the Pacific coast in the south of Mexico. And she's a very well experienced journalist, and she told me, well, in 2012, 2010, there was no way to recognize a colleague, even if they had like a press written in the vest. You didn't know to what extent the organized crime was infiltrating the trade. So for her, it was better to work alone in the local level. But then also she told me that at the same time she collaborated with the national media and some foreign correspondents, and that was a way of her feeling more protected. So if you see, there's no it's the same actor, but with different levels of risk, different contexts. So I think these examples are interesting to rethink that it's probably not a new chip or like a new kind of mindset. It depends on the conditions, and even the same actors that can have like a collaborative experience can behave differently according to the situation. A third point is that right now on the current global media system, there is also a legitimate competition. It's not either or, and some of the cases that I have studied reveal that there has to be a room for flexibility in order to have a trial and error in order to create the rules and make them agreed by everyone in the group. And the contrast between two projects is very revealing for me. For example, in Mexico, there were a couple of media outlets that were involved in the Panama Papers, and at the same time, in the same years, there was another project called Mexico Leaks, which was also a whistleblowing project. But the two organizations work very differently. Like the ICIJ in the Panama Papers had a central control, as Vanessa was saying, the centrality and the leadership of getting only the access to the database and all the reputational previous work. But in that case, the rules were kind of rigid, and whereas in the Mexico Leaks, it was just more like laissez-faire. And the media outlets that were working there, and specifically the reporters, were the same, but in the Panama Papers, they were the first to admit that sometimes the cooperation wasn't that fluid, and that sometimes the division of labor wasn't that they repeated the same work or they rushed some of the publication. Whereas in Mexico leaks, even though it was less centralized, they had the reporters had more a say in how to adapt the rules, and that was very, very interesting, because at the end they achieved a deeper kind of more sophisticated division and organization. So, and I think the last point, because I think I have just a few minutes left, is that the projects can come and go, but the materiality of not only the technologies, the devices that these projects generate can last a little bit longer, and can also be great tools for expanding the networks and incorporate different types of expertise. So the data sets, the databases, the search engines, but not only that, sometimes even less expensive or less sophisticated technologies like methodologies. And I think that is very interesting, because that can help us see or explore the durability of these enterprises. Because it's not only about impact and kind of the embargo and the joint publication is about kind of incorporating other actors that are even non-journalistic actors, other expertises, and also kind of institutionalizing by using methodologies, ways of seeing the complexity, of being able to see more sophistication in the stories. And I think I will wrap up with that.
Okay. Thank you, Rodrigo, for a very sociological view of the problem. And I think we have a lot of material to discuss. I would like to kind of wrap up for those who were watching the streaming and probably were not here from the very beginning, but where we had three very, very insightful and very interesting interventions about transnational collaborations in investigative journalism. We had the vision from Gabriela Manuli from the GIJN. We had the intervention from Vanessa Higgins as well from the Texas State University, and from Rodrigo Arteaga with his preliminary findings on collaborations in investigative journalism in Mexico. And kind of trying to summarize a little bit of what we have heard is that in investigative journalism, and the idea of investigative journalism, kind of the trade, as Rodrigo was calling it, there are certain things going on. There are kind of trends and even ideologies, even kind of also a lot of influential practices. That some of those have been shown by Vanessa, but what we see here, I think, is kind of this kind of hopes and the technological possibilities, that the internet and all the connectivity that we have nowadays is kind of posing or kind of putting before journalists and the public, either for collaboration or for consuming this kind of journalism. But at the same time, we have a tension as well, with a lot of these negotiations, because it's not always possible to collaborate, but also something more structural, which is a kind of broken business model as well, that we have seen for the last 10 years or so. Kind of some people were trying to prophesy about the end of the newspapers and all these things, but it was kind of more that kind of the end of a business model. Also, we cannot really kind of turn a blind eye into the economic crisis of 2008. And all this kind of is taking place kind of in contextual, in the context, kind of in the conjuncture, and it's kind of putting an end to some of the practices that we thought were kind of essential or part of the ethos of journalism, which is competition, and as Vanessa was saying, kind of scoops, which is kind of epitomized in this idea of competition. So we have a lot to discuss, and I would like to kind of ask people watching the panel if they want to share some of their impressions with us. And now is the time to do that. Please do. So just to give them some time to put out their questions for us, I would like to start with you with some of the questions that we put at right there in the presentation. So how does this kind of idea of transnational collaboration is kind of in interplay with local journalism? I think this is kind of a very interesting take. And I mean, other people, for instance, from the Reuters Institute have been publishing some material on this thing and seeing what is happening in local journalism. But I kind of would like to see the contrast between kind of the global idea, no, or this transnational idea, and what is happening at the very local level. I don't know if someone would like to start and say something about this contrast. Okay, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I think it is very interesting to see that, for example, in that vignette that I share of Michoacán, that you have very extreme cases of uncertainty and risk. And for me, I mean, even like for everyone, would say, like, if you are not able to trust anyone in your surroundings, that is very indicative. That is like hell on earth, like a world where you are not able to trust. And I think that is speaking of the increasing attacks and the violence, the anti-press violence that has been spreading everywhere. I think that has to be taken into consideration. Just to I think that is something that surpasses the international aid and the grants and the calls for projects, and that requires a very radical, in the sense of structural, like political economy intervention of regulation, but also of making less, reducing the concentration of the market, which is that will go to a neoliberal critique on where we are right now in terms of global inequality imbalances.
This is a very interesting point about inequalities. So Vanessa wants to say something as well, and please do.
Yes, I really appreciate what you were saying, Rodrigo. Is very interesting. I think just going off from that, also in terms of just structures, I guess, understanding that a lot of local news organizations have either folded or reduced the number of journalists working. So just kind of thinking of that crisis since the 2008 that you're mentioning, Irvin, how local news organizations have really been suffering from that, and the others that have emerged, some fantastic examples of independent journalism are also smaller organizations, right? They tend to be smaller. So just thinking of the resources that, well, from one end, those small organizations might be more nimble to be able to participate in such collaborations, right? They're more agile to adapt to these new ideas by necessity, or, just more agile in that sense. But also thinking of the cost that it takes in terms of time in participating. So there's the two things, right? A small organization might benefit more, might grow its network, might be more nimble, but might not be able to participate because of the lack of resources in terms of time, right? When you have fewer people, it's harder to invest in that time that it takes. So I don't know, it's just from an economy perspective, not from the topics, right?
Yeah, and I think this local issue is really interesting. I think that sometimes we don't need to think in dichotomies, local journalism versus transnational collaboration, because in fact there are a lot of great examples of transnational investigations that work with local journalists, like for example this pangolin story that I was mentioning in Asia. They basically work with a lot of local reporters who reported in their local language. I think the issue is also trying to address the inequalities that we're mentioning. I think in a way, when I was talking about the usual suspects versus bringing new people, it was also that, like, I think a lot of time there are really valuable local journalists, but they are not really immersed into this big international network, so they are not going to be called to the Panama Papers, I don't know, but I think like being able to, as I said, come into a conference or network, or even getting the training that they couldn't get anyhow. Hopefully now that everything is online, this training will be more widely available. But of course, it's a big issue, the inequality, and it's not just resources. I mean, resources also language barrier, or when they speak some local language. So I think it's a really, really interesting issue. And I also wanted to say in general that I'm really glad that I see all you academics researching and talking about this. I mean, a few years ago, I started to do some literature review on the impact of investigative journalism, and I was appalled to see how little was written about. There was a lot written about the impact of journalism in general, but there was so little about investigative journalism per se. And now I can see there is much more about investigative journalism and collaborations. And so I'm really looking forward to read what you are going to write, all of you.
Thank you very much for your interventions, and I do believe that it is very interesting to have this kind of input from many different perspectives, because the dichotomy that Gabby was mentioning is sometimes very hard to break in our thinking. So it's very interesting. I know that people from Red de Periodistas in Mexico, they're watching the streaming, although there is a delay in the streaming, but they've been working mainly on kind of threats and attacks on journalists. So I would like to kind of explore kind of the connection, if there is one, between collaborations and security for journalists. If someone wants to jump in.
I can talk a little bit,
Yeah.
but I think Rodrigo had some excellent examples there already. He mentioned a little bit, but in the focus group that we conducted, we had several people talk about how the group, the network in itself was a safety mechanism, in the sense of, I am not the only one going against this giant multinational, right? Where it is much easier for my one organization to receive the repercussion from this giant than it is from 10 news organizations from 10 different countries to be suffering the same, right? And I think so that it gives this sense of security with the numbers and the impact of the stories. The stories have greater impact, and I guess the global aspect of it too, right? So it's not only local. You have audiences in many different countries accessing this information. So the force by the safety by the numbers.
Yes. Yeah, go on, Vanessa. Gabby, sorry.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit obvious, but of course it brought back to the surface all the issues of also digital security, and like it's so needed. You will be surprised how many really top journalists, they are still not top notch with their digital security and protecting themselves. And when you take this across borders, so I think that this is a really important topic. And again, we go again to the resources. You have a big collaboration, you have resources, you will be able to have a secure platform, you will be able to, but if you do a collaboration with smaller local outlets in, I don't know, in some poor countries, and then you cannot even afford the tool, or so it's bringing this issue again.
Yeah, I think for me, the key question, and I have been discussing this with Irving a few years now, is how these collaborations can, if they can translate, collaborations, I mean, in terms of working together, can they translate into political organization and a sense of community? Because something that is very evident is that, and from the amazement that I kind of, I was a little bit provocative in reading the speeches and kind of the high hopes of the new era and the new, you know, this sense of community. That amazement is indicative of the other side of the coin, which is the fragmentation and division of the trade, which is something that is super palpable, at least in the Latin American context. And I think it would be interesting for you, Irving, to say a few words about Periodistas de a pie, which is basically the biggest support network in Mexico. And that is the key question, if this, the lone wolf is preventing the union, and who benefits from that fragmentation? Because security and, you know, political and political strength in the terrain isn't, yeah, it's about digital security, and I myself have done some workshops on that, but it's also about the sense of community and the support network.
Yeah, sorry, I'm gonna say just briefly something about my own research, because yes, I am an investigative journalist myself. I work for Connectus, but I did this PhD. It was, I mean, one of my case studies for my PhD at Goldsmiths had to do with investigative journalism in Mexico and with Periodistas de a pie. And yeah, one of the first or the most important findings was that there was this collaboration, that there was kind of this urgency to collaborate because of all these many threats around them, you know, security, poor labor conditions. But then there were a lot of hindrances for organization, for self-organization, which, I mean, for any kind of guild organization in the world, I mean, it will be like something automatic, no? But kind of because of the particularities of the political and economic circumstances of Mexico, it was very difficult to form a union, for instance, no? Even talk about unionizing. So that was kind of very, very difficult. And Periodistas de a pie, even Periodistas de a pie with all their amazing work, with all their organization, it was difficult for them to kind of even assume some of these tasks that kind of a union or a guild organization would do, like defending journalists at the workplace, for instance, no? So that's just one thing that is, I think, very important to say. But I would like to kind of hand over to some people who are commenting already, and we have a question for Rodrigo, actually. It says, Rodrigo could say a few more words on the long view of collaboration in journalism, historically speaking. He mentioned ethnographic and archival research.
Yeah, I mean, there is evidence in classic ethnographies like Tunstall, journalist at work, and the classic Guy Tuchman, Making the News, is it? And there is evidence of, you know, of a lot of combinations of correspondence and people, even when there was no typewriters, and there was like a syndicate of just taking notes in Parliament, and
Oops, I think we lost Rodrigo there. We lost Rodrigo, but we can kind of continue with other questions, perhaps in the meantime, while we have him again. And I would like to kind of try to, because this is one of the subjects that is kind of also kind of eliciting a little bit of debate within the kind of the field of research of media, which is to what extent the idea of investigative journalism and even of journalism itself is kind of an idea that is exported from the global north, and then imposed elsewhere with different traditions, with different contextual factors. So I don't know if you have any ideas, Gabi, about kind of some of the resistances or kind of the kind of difficulties for kind of this somehow kind of alien idea of what journalism could be.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting question, imported or not. What I would say for sure, in my experience being Latin American and meeting all these journalists from different countries all these years, and investigative journalists, that for sure in the more developed countries, you really have a proper tradition, proper investigative units. You have people that can spend months in a story, but in other parts of the world, this is absolutely a luxury. This is that what I said before. A lot of times you do investigative reporting in your free time. You do it on top of your daily beat. You do it because you have the passion, but no, it's, I don't know, even myself, when I work in the investigative unit in Argentina, we had to keep producing stories. Yeah, maybe we could work on story a few months, but then in between, there has to be something, you know? So I think this idea of the McRacker working for 2 years in investigation, yeah, this is a luxury that not everybody can afford. But I also can see, because this is what we do, and every year, every month, we have new options, new applications for membership, and the non-profit investigative journalism is growing everywhere in the world. I mean, there is this new business model in a way, and I have really high hopes, because I can see most of the best collaborations and most of the best investigative journalism a lot of times comes from these networks, these organizations, maybe in connection with big media organization. Of course, you still need to partner with a big media, but I think there is a great hope in non-profit investigative journalism.
Yeah, we have Rodrigo again, but just for him to kind of make sense of what we're talking about right now, is if the idea of investigative journalism is something that is exported from the global north and then kind of assimilated, by the global south in some sort of, again, kind of an inequality relationship, of power, with could be cultural imperialism, could be like kind of influence, of soft power, etc. So I don't know if you both, Vanessa or Rodrigo, have some impressions about this. Yeah, Rodrigo?
No, Vanessa, if
Vanessa, sorry. Yeah, go on.
Okay, no, I was saying, go ahead, but I'll talk a little bit too. It's a really interesting question. I think, yes, we take a lot of clues from the global north, right? In Latin America, for sure. The United States, France, right? Journalism has been highly inspired by the global north. But I think also it's also localized, right? There's a lot of the practices are localized in many ways. But I really like what Gabi was saying with these emergent news organization, independent nonprofits. But there's a lot of vibrancy, a lot of creative enterprises, and a lot of awareness of the need to attend to new audiences that weren't being really tapped before, right? So that there's a lot of vibrancy and a lot of innovation being brought by that. And I think that they are not the only news organizations engaging in transnational collaborations by any means, but I think in many ways those organizations are more nimble. They may not have the resources or the time, but in many ways they're more nimble to participate. So and very creative. So I think there's interesting things happening in changing right now.
Okay, yeah. Rodrigo?
I'm going to be a bit provocative because all those, there is one big missing actor, which is the state and the public, like the public side of all the funding. And that is kind of in relation to what Irving was saying of the anathema of unionizing, of demanding your rights as workers, empowering journalists and practitioners as workers. And I think even though, I don't want to, it's not my place to criticize the international aid and all the grants, and because sometimes, and I know this from first-hand accounts, that these foundations are probably one of the few kind of resources, resources that journalists have sometimes to do what they love. But I think we have to have a discussion in the trade about redistribution of wealth, and that redistribution implies funding journalism and other enterprises and ventures outside the commercial realm. And non-profits are also not necessarily guided by the public logic of the and that the role of the state, it has to be addressed. And I know this coming from a liberal perspective is quite it's quite disruptive, but that's why I mentioned the precedent of the McBride report and the UNESCO controversy in the 70s, because there was a big debate of taxing tech companies, of sharing technology, of subsidizing communitarian media, local media, and that was all shut down by the Reagan administration and Thatcher administration. So I think that is like, as a generational professional culture, the lone wolf is, in that sense, individualistic, competitive, market-oriented. That is neoliberalism at its heart.
Yeah, we have 2 minutes. This was, I think, a very interesting part of the debate. We probably should have started with that one. And I understand as well that kind of, the new paradigm of philanthropic, organizations kind of giving this money to journalism is probably kind of the next, or kind of what is lacking in research as well, and from a critical perspective too. So we would like to hear, and probably ourselves can research more about this. We have like two minutes, so I would like to probably ask you to kind of just wrap up in 30 seconds or something like that about the importance of thinking about transnational collaborations in investigative journalism. So we'll start just kind of in the same order with Gabby again, and then Vanessa, and then Rodrigo.
You caught me off guard for 30 seconds. So I work for GIJN. I have high hope on what's happening, because these people, and most of the people that are doing collaboration, they are my friends. I know them. Also, let's not forget, when we talk about funding and foundation, let's not forget that a lot of these nonprofits are very strong in the membership model. So that's not all of them, of course. It's still a minority, but there are a lot that are doing really, really well in getting membership and getting funded by the public and not relying so much on foundations. So I'm very optimistic. I have high hopes, but as I said, let's not romanticize. Not because it has the tag collaboration, it means great. And unfortunately, I don't believe the lone wolf has disappeared from the face of Earth yet.
Interesting. Vanessa?
Yes, I'm also an optimistic. So I see the collaborations having many benefits for journalism in Latin America, the impact, just the growth in many ways. But really, one of the things that I was really impressed and struck me from listening to the focus group was the sense of personal growth, that these collaborations allow journalists to grow. They allow journalists to see their limitations, to see, to know where they need to grow, to know, because you can have training, but if I don't know what I need to improve on, then I don't know where to look for, right? So these collaborations allow journalists to see in practice things that they lack, allow to see in practice things that they don't need to invest, that they can work with others as well, allows a change of perspective, because a lot of local issues have global connections. So this global perspective is also really valuable from a societal point of view. It's understanding that local issues have global implications and vice versa. Things that are happening globally will impact us locally as well, right? I can't talk about climate change and just think about what's happening in Austin, Texas. So it's really, I think I have high hopes. But I think that it takes a lot of changes and a lot of negotiation, specifically with the business models. I think it's not an easy transition, or it has inequalities, as Rodrigo was saying.
Thank you, Rodrigo.
For me, it's just like, this is a very, very old story. It's about in times of need, you have to work together. That is a very primal story, very old. Even though you have all this optimism in technology and the futurism of what technology can produce, I think this is very basic. It is in times of crisis, you need help. And you not only need allies, but you have to ask for help. And that requires acknowledging vulnerability. And that goes against all the professional culture that the generations of journalists under neoliberalism has been adapting, which is, the lone wolf. So away with it.
Away with it, lone wolf. I agree. And yoga as well.
Yoga, yeah.
No, Gabi?
Of course, always yoga.
Right here. Well, thank you very much. This has been a very enriching panel. Thank you, all of you panelists, and thank you also to the public for being here with us for an hour and a half. And I really do hope that this panel workshop is the beginning of even more research and more journalism as well. So thank you very much, and I think we can ask to finish the panel. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.